Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to tell you about an awesome way for you to rub elbows with your favorite podcast hosts here on the Sports History Network, while at the same time rooting for your hometown team this upcoming NFL season. You've been hearing all about our partner, Tailgate Fantasy, the past few weeks. Well, dig on this. Tailgate created a special Sports History Network league for our listeners, so we can put the word fan back into fantasy football together. It's free to join, and if you do so before the season kicks off, you'll automatically be entered into a drawing for a free t-shirt from one of our other partners, Home Field Apparel. It's a win-win-win! So hurry up today and head to sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate for all the details. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate.
Blog Talk Radio.
Tonight we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats Football Hits.
Yeah.
The Gridiron Greats Publishing and Broadcasting Network, in conjunction with Swick Enterprises. We're live from the Wallingford, Connecticut home of Gridiron Greats Magazine. And I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats Magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America which focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 140-plus years of football history and memorabilia. You can find us on the web at gridirongreatsmagazine.com. We're sponsored in part by MSB Sports Cards. Check out their website at msbsportscards.com for one of the largest selections of vintage football cards and memorabilia on the web. And we're also sponsored in part by BST Auctions. Check out their website for their upcoming auction at bstauctions.com. It is at this time I'd like to introduce my co-host, who is a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats Magazine, a football memorabilia historian, specializing in pre-World War II items, in particular Red Grange, and also Seattle Seahawk items, in particular Steve Largent. He hails from Portland, Oregon. Mr. Joe Squires. Joe, welcome to the show tonight.
Captain, good afternoon, sir.
How are you?
I just realized I need to have some Gridiron Great business cards made for the National. It says senior contributing writer.
I'll have to get some
for
you.
Is it okay if I use the logo? Or?
I'll have a little abbreviation on JSSCW. And a little picture of Grange and Largent on it. People know who they are.
Oh, that's so good.
Hey,
so good.
Before we get into pure football, I hear a rumor, and I couldn't find the song to lead in today, but I hear you're going to Russia for something, and it's not an electrical conference or anything like that.
Yes, sir. I am leaving for Russia for World Cup tomorrow at 5 o'clock. I'm in Russia for 12 days. Flying to St. Petersburg for 2 games, and then we fly up to Moscow for 3 games, and fly out to Frankfurt for a day and a half or so, just to kind of get out of the motherland, and then back stateside. So yeah, 13 days door to door. I'm looking forward to going with 3 buddies.
Wow. That's all I can say.
The other football. Wow. So, yeah, 4 years ago we went to Brazil. My friends talked me into it. They're big soccer fans. I'm like, I don't like soccer. And they're like, do you like getting out of the country for 2 weeks and getting drunk every night? I'm like, yeah, all right, let's go. So that's but it's amazing. I got to say, it's amazing. You know, that's
definitely a once in a lifetime type of trip. I'll just point out, and I'll give them a quick plug here. I'll be watching some World Cup games at the local soccer restaurant, Los Mariachis, here in Wallingford. I will have my seat there. I haven't decided which jerseys I'll be wearing for the Cup. But I'll be telling them.
Nothing says soccer like. Yeah, sorry.
I'll be telling them you're there.
My buddy's there.
And we'll probably see you on the TV or whatever. But anyways, I hope you have a good time.
Nothing says come watch soccer here like a restaurant named Los Mariachis.
It's a hotbed of soccer in Wallingford. They have 6 TVs with soccer on most of the time. But they're great folks. If you're ever in Wallingford, people who are in the local areas, make sure you stop by.
Yep. And we're going to.
I hope you have a great time. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight before our guests in discussing some obscure football sets. And I want you to lead off with your specialization. And let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, probably 3-4 episodes ago, we got onto a tangent conversation, as we often do, Captain, about rare Red Grange cards. And then you and I took it, offline, after the music stops. Oftentimes you and I just kind of hang out, or we call each other after the show just for a recap. And we started discussing what the rare cards were. And I have the privilege of knowing Mike Blaisdell pretty well and picking up a couple cards when he decided to sell offline. And at one point, the kind of the 4 rarest football cards of Red Grange. Probably 3 out of the 4 I had in my possession. I sold my 1933 Sports King Red Grange a little while ago just to kind of fund some other projects. But one pretty rare card just came up for sale, the 1926 Shotwell, the rare back card where it shows him in his lucky number 77 jersey and looking over his left shoulder. That's a pretty rare. I think there's 2 of those known to existence, and both of them are in pretty bad shape. Red Grange looking over his left shoulder with that come hither look like he's in a 1989 Steve Largent Pacific card set, climbing Mount Rainier with Jim Zorn or something like that.
Well, let me ask you this: How many Grange cards do you think are actually in existence? Not so much graded, but what's your gut feeling as far as what's out there?
Oh boy, I've actually never thought about that, Bob.
I mean, I'm saying to myself, and this question was posed to me on the Shotwells numerous times, how many are there out there? Okay, so take a guess. My best guess, and again, I don't read PSA population reports or anything like that, but my best guess is probably, 30, 40 cards of each at the most, with the rare backs, maybe a half a dozen at the most? Because, again, we don't know what's sitting in a lot of people's collections. And, again, if they ever come to the market, that'll be confirmed type of situation. But until that point, I really don't think there's much of anything out there.
Well, take that lucky number 77. It's rare because it was pulled from production. It's, because he was wearing a Chicago Bears jersey, and Cash and Kerry Pyle had Shotwell pull that from production because it wasn't. It had to do with the movie. It didn't have to do with the movie.
Right.
So.
Right.
So who knows? It's kind of like, why is the Honus Wagner card so rare? It's because it was pulled from production. Because, by Wagner.
Right.
So this is the same thing. That.
Well, what we've talked about numerous times, how many of these cards actually have survived? Were the cards traded in for a premium, so on and so forth? There's all different issues with regards to a lot of these card sets from the 20s or 30s. Not so much issues, but just theories behind what we can actually understand today, seeing what's in the market today. And again, we'll go to the National in Cleveland in a few weeks. And how many Shotwells are going to be on the floor? A half a dozen? 10? Who knows?
Yeah.
So, it's beyond rare.
Well, yeah, and what we always forget, as Carl mentioned once in an article he wrote, is, think about the paper drives of the World War II.
Right.
And then what I always think about is floods and fires. How many people had
exactly.
they had in the shoe, water pipe broke and damaged it. So there's getting chucked into trash, there's paper drives, and then there's just natural attrition, of cards.
Right.
Right.
So to me, those issues are rare. We know they're rare. Red Grange, any Red Grange collector, I'm sure, would love to have at least one type card for his collection as far as the Shotwells are concerned. What else does Grange have that is really unusual that you're aware of?
Well, obviously, the unicorn of Grange cards, the Spalding blank back, which they call it, and I think most people would agree that card was put together as an example. It was sent out. We've seen the letter, that Spalding sent out, and it mentions Grange, and one can only assume that Grange card, because it's blank back, was sent out with the letter to encourage people to sign off and send in a picture. So basically, a letter went out from Spalding saying, "Hey, we've got Red Grange on board. Here's an example of what it's going to look like. Please send in a picture and a release letter." And, there's probably half a dozen of these 1926 Spalding, samples, that are left. And I've got kind of a cool one. I got it from the Dreyer Museum, when they liquidated their asset. Mine's oversized, so you can tell that it was in a larger, piece, call it a normal football card size, but blanked around the sides. So rare salesman samples, or whatever you want to call it, example.
And again, here's an interesting point that you bring up. When you say the word sample card or test card or whatever the case may be, okay, the rare of rare. Is it a sample card? Was it a mainstream card? Was it just a mainstream card that just didn't get in the market, so on and so forth? So I find that fascinating because, for the simple reason, you could still, in my opinion, find very, very obscure stuff. You just got to continue to look for it over and over and over again. It's a never-ending quest to find this stuff. But for Grange, again, the Shotwell and then the Spalding are just two amazing cards to have in a collection. What else can you comment on?
Yeah, it really resonated with me. We don't really own these cards. We just possess them for a little while, and then we move on. They deserve to be around in other people's possessions. They deserve to be scanned and shared with people rather than locked up in a safe somewhere for never to be seen. There's a very so population 6 to 10 of that sample for the 26 Spalding, population 2 to 3 for that what they the rare number 77 back, the lucky number, the 9B 9 Bravo card they call it. Another very rare version of it is the 1928 Star Player Candy. I can think of about 3 of those floating around. SPCs, Star Player Candies, are very, very rare to begin with. With less than a dozen or less of each example. I mean, there's one of ones in a lot of that. Just an unknown checklist, and the Grange Star Player Candy is very rare. In that as well. Just a couple of examples.
Well, the one set that's close to me as far as being rare are the Walker Packers Cleaners set. Even though there's maybe I would say at least a dozen sets in existence throughout collections and split up and so on and so forth. I'm fortunate I have one type card for my collection that I picked up several years ago. But up to that point, I really never saw them. I mean, all the shows I've seen and done over the years, I never saw that. And all of a sudden, they came to light, and they're out there. It's amazing to me. And again, it could be, you never know, the next, Grange unknown card or Packers Walker Cleaner type set unknown comes to the market, and then that starts another chase with everything again. And it's amazing. It truly is amazing. But again,
and that's what's beautiful about our hobby is you're always discovering stuff. Every week I do a Steve Largent search on eBay, and every week I hold out hope that some never known, never seen card is going to float my way. I'm going to be like, every week disappointed. The 1 week that I decided not to do a Steve Largent search will probably be the 1 week that a very rare card comes up, or a never seen before card.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I'm trying to put together, which is not really that obscure, but it is very difficult to put the whole set together, and I still don't know how many cards are in the set, is the 1979 Icy Disc Football card disc set. And I got about 8 or 9 of them. And I keep looking on eBay. I see the same 4 all the time. I got 3 of the 4, yada, yada, yada. And then I keep searching and trying to find any type of checklist. I've contacted the companies, so on and so forth. And I'm sure it's probably out there, and I just can't find it anywhere. And I'm always hoping going to a national or whatever. Here's a guy, hey, you want that set? Give me $5 for it. Yeah, I've had it in my case for like 30 years now, since '79.
I'm so tired of.
I used to work at 7-Eleven. We gave them away.
Going back to the Walker Packer Cleaner. Yeah, but going back to the Walker Packer Cleaner, I can remember oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bob.
No, I was just going to say, and you see them graded. The Icy is graded for like $300-400. Why is beyond me? Give me a break. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
But I can remember 8-9 years ago, Andy Becker calling me, and he was talking about the Star Player candy set that was for sale at some auction house, and I forget. And as most of my obscure football knowledge, I learned from either Andy or John. So and Andy begins to tell me how rare it is. I'm like, oh, that's incredible. And he's like, hey, I got half a set. Do you want you grab half and I'll grab half, and we split it. And so we bought it. It was sent to his. He picked out the half he wanted and sent me the other half. I think he had a whole set that he wanted to upgrade. So I ended up with a whole set out of that. He got to cherry pick the ones he wanted. So I ended up with a whole kind of lower end set of that Walker Packer Cleaner. And you, I'd never seen it before. And I had no idea how rare it was until I got it and I started thumbing through it. And it's one of my favorite sets. It came in the book, which is even rarer, I guess. The Walker Packer Cleaner book.
As far as I know, there's only 5 or 6 of those books around. But all right, it's time for our special guests. Moving along here. And at this time, I'd like to welcome our special guest. He is an expert and the authority on exhibit cards of all types, with his current published book, Exhibits and Related Sports Arcade Cards. He is also the expert in boxing cards. He's author of 8 editions of the book, America's Great Boxing Cards. It is at this time I want to welcome to the show, Mr. Adam Washoe. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. You want to talk about incredibly obscure things? We'll talk about exhibit cards.
We'll talk boxing collectors too.
Even more obscure.
Adam, I gotta say,
exactly.
I gotta say, man, we usually only reserve interviews for football collectors. So, but I know you collect football, so we're welcome in. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I do indeed.
You have a very nice football card collection, from what I could tell, Adam, and I know the exhibits. You have an incredible knowledge of the entire run of them, and we're going to talk a little bit about them tonight. But first, I'd like to start off by asking you if you can tell the audience when and how did you start getting collecting and getting involved in sports cards?
Oh, I'm definitely going to date myself on this one. I have actually been collecting cards for 48 years.
Oh, man.
I started as a little kid, of course, with my father buying me cards every Saturday or Sunday or Friday evening at the local ice cream store. And by 71, 72, I was buying packs like crazy and never stopped. My first experience with the organized hobby was I attended the 1976 American Sports Card Collectors Association convention Thanksgiving weekend in New York City.
Wow.
I love it.
Wow.
That's
It
really
was great.
Cool.
I mean, it was just like, it was exactly like it is today, right down to the filth. It was exactly the same.
And I can distinctly remember. I distinctly remember my mother would not let me go on the train to New York to that show because I wasn't old enough yet.
Well, we lived in the city, and my father took me, and while we were there, I was trying to complete a run of Willie Mays cards, and I ran out of money. So my father lent me the last $25 I needed in 1976 to finish off the cards. My mother was ready to kill him. Now, if I could go back today and buy 152 Topps Mazes for $25 a piece, I would happily do so.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
So
the good old days.
So Adam, even back then, were collectors walking around in Hawaiian shirts with fanny packs and black socks and sandals?
Well, the fanny packs didn't exist, but they had the equivalent. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Not a happy-looking bunch, the card collectors.
Yeah, obviously the peak of health, six-pack abs, perfectly coiffed hair.
Yeah, right, 12-pack abs and comb-overs. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, like what we're used to seeing at the National. Okay, just making sure. Have you picked up your black socks and sandals for Cleveland National?
I'm ready to go. I could leave today. I could leave today. I have underwear with holes in them. I'm ready to go.
Well, getting back to what you said, you collected since the early 70s. I go back to 1965, as the story goes, and everybody's heard my story. But again, shows in the 1970s, to me, especially for me, since I collected only football, were great challenges, to say the least. And again, I always throw this out. I would ask dealers, do they have any football cards? They would be very quiet. They go to the back of the table. They pull out a cheese box or some sort of shoe box, and they would say, "Give me $5 for it or $10 for it." I never knew what was there. In a lot of cases, I wasn't allowed to open up the box to see what was in there, so I would just buy it, and then go home and then try to figure out what I had. And then again, you really didn't have strong, price guides or even guidebooks at the time to try to figure out what it was. So I used to just sort everything according to what it looked like, and then try to figure out afterwards what I had and what I tried to collect. So the hobby's evolved dramatically in 47 years, to say the least. And again, but it's kind of nice to. It's kind of nice
when
to
I was
remember the good old days.
When I was when I first moved out to California, really the only football cards I had exposure to were the Topps products every year that I picked up in wax packs. When I got out here, my parents became friends with some people who had full-grown adult sons who didn't want their, and they basically gave me a giant box of cards going back into the early 50s. I dumped them out on the floor in my room and started sorting, and there was tons of football cards I'd never seen before. They were Bowmans, they were Fleer, and some of the early Topps products. No idea what they were. I just sorted them out into stacks. And I did visually. I just said, okay, that looks like that. So I put them together. And that was how I got started on that stuff.
Wow.
Truly amazing. Truly amazing.
I've seen your exhibit cards posted up, and you've always got an example of exhibit cards, whether it's shades of different shades of green, non-sports exhibit cards, different backs. You're that guy who knows a lot about that one, exhibit cards.
I got into it years and years ago,
Yeah, how'd you get into it? And how'd you just start picking up those nuances? Because you're the guy who's just different. Like I said, here's the sepia one, and this one's got a light green tint. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how the hell does he notice that? You know.
Well, you know, what happened was I have this sort of organizational bent when it comes to cards. That's why I wrote the boxing books in the first place, because there was nothing out there. So when it came to exhibits, I collected the post-war common mainstream baseball stuff, and then I was going to some shows out here in Los Angeles back in the heyday of shows. I ran into an old-time collector from Northern California, a guy named John Spalding. He was very big in PCL baseball, and he was a sports writer up in the Bay Area, big into PCL stuff. And what he had, which really caught my eye, was he had about 3 binders full of 1920s exhibit cards. You know, all different stuff. And I ended up just buying everything I could and draining his brain, if you will, on everything he could tell me about them. You know, a little while later, I went to another show out here, and I saw my first boxing exhibit cards, which I had no idea they existed. A dealer had a book full of boxing exhibits. I ended up picking up a Joe Louis, a Jack Johnson, a Rocky Marciano, a Dempsey, a Tunney, and a few other big-name fighters, and then I started going, this is really cool. What do I do here? You know, I started looking around. There was nothing, no resources, no guides. There was a small listing for the Exhibit Champions set in the Beckett 3-sport book, which covered, football, basketball, hockey, that one set. That was the only thing listed. And I would see other cards. You know, you don't know what they are, but you'd pick them up because they were so inexpensive. And I mean, I'd look at it and go, wow, that's a Hall of Famer from the 1920s for $15. Okay, I'll buy that. You know, now fast forward to eBay when that starts popping up in the late 90s, and you go on there and, oh my God, this, you know, you could just run a complete sort and select on this stuff and find all kinds of exhibit cards. And that's when I went a little nuts and started just buying everything in sight.
Well, and especially when you knew what they were, you knew what to search for, whereas other people didn't know what they were. Yeah.
And after a while, you know, they were such a stepchild when it came to collecting that after a while, I start going to auction houses and they'd have, you know, oh yeah, here's 500 exhibits, and I'd bid $1 for them, and, you know, pick them up for $20.
Yep. Yeah, it's so interesting because 1948. I mean, you think, and some of those non-sports that you have examples of, you know, which are awesome, or even older than that. But you think about, you know, when we think about football, you know, 1935 and 1948 Leaf are the two football sets that come to mind. But there's not much respect that's given to its you know, younger stepbrother, 1948 Bowman and 1948 exhibits. They're really underappreciated.
Well,
absolutely.
With the 48 exhibits, I always said, you know, a lot of collectors felt they were like postcards, and therefore they didn't want to collect them. I was fascinated by them. I picked up my first one probably in 79 or 80. Had no clue what it was. I thought it was, you know, again, I thought it was a postcard, but I really liked you had a full player photo, which was cool to look at instead of, and again, nothing on the back, which made it even more interesting. So you had a good search on for it at that time. And again, like you said, Adam, I mean, there was absolutely no information whatsoever, anywhere, with the exception, again, 79-80 Beckett book. They had the little that exhibit champion set, and that was it. And you know, again, and they really haven't expanded it much since then. They haven't really talked.
No,
about
they haven't.
At all.
And the information that's out there is wrong, and that's the part that really drove me crazy. You know, as a person chasing information on exhibit cards, the best sources are going to be the old exhibit companies' product catalogs and their mailers and similar and salesman samples and those kinds of things. And as I developed a data bank of that information, I realized what's out there is just wrong. You know, like, for example, everybody lists these things as the 1948 to 52 exhibit football set. It's not.
Yep.
Obviously not, because I've got a 55 catalog from them listing the football cards. You know, they also list a bunch of short prints. They're not short prints. They can't be. They made 32 cards every year because the sheet is 32 cards. Now, they sub cards in and out from one year to the next. So you've got cards that are in shorter supply, but they're not true short prints. They're just from a specific year.
Right.
You know, the only years we can say for sure what they were, we know for sure what's in 1950 because of that checklist card that popped up in BST's auction last year. That definitively pins what's that amazing card. That definitively pins down what's there. That year, for some reason, they made checklist cards for baseball, football, boxing, and wrestling, and they sent them out. And almost none of them have survived apparently, but that's the only football I've ever seen, the one that came up last year. That lists the 32 cards from the 1950 issue. And then in 55, you've got the postcard backs, so you know what those are because they've got the postcard back on them.
Adam, jumping ahead, I just want to ask one quick question, and we'll go back to the script. But what was the actual last year that you're aware of that the football exhibits were actually printed?
1955.
It's 55. Okay, all right.
Yeah, now
all right.
It could be later because unfortunately I don't have catalogs going past that.
Okay, all right. Because I have never seen anything late 50s, early 60s, and correct me if I'm wrong. The other sports, they continue to print for those other sports later in the 50s and 60s.
Oh yeah, they did, and I don't think they updated them after 52 or so.
Okay, all right. That's for our listeners' knowledge too, because I've had several people ask me, well, you're right, it's 1948 to 52, and I said no, there are cards that were printed after 1952, and they were cards distributed through the 50s, because I'm sure they had a lot of extras. You know what I mean? And when they put them in their machines and everything, I'm sure they had a lot of inventory to get rid of, and they sold them that way. So
they were sellers.
You in theory could probably get a 1948 card out of a machine, let's say in 1961 or whatever, that type of situation. So
the other thing is these were not these weren't pack products. They were sold in bricks of 500 cards for vending out of these machines. So if somebody had an exhibit vendor and they didn't get very much foot traffic with it, they could have cards sitting in there for years that might be vended out of there many years after they were made.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You hear anecdotal stories about people. Yeah, I bought these cards in 1972 in the arcade in Podunk, Georgia, and you very well might have, because there might have been a machine sitting there with stuff still in it. To this day, people find machines with cards in them.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. I never thought about the vending machines being left out like that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I bought a vending machine a while back from the mid-'60s, which had old cards sitting in it.
Wow.
Although when I buy that kind of thing, it's always old entertainment cards of actresses or something. No baseball, no football, nothing good.
What led you to write your new book, Exhibit and Related Sports Arcade Cards?
Well, as I said, I was going absolutely nuts trying to find information, and the same thing that happened with the boxing book. I didn't find any information on boxing cards, so I said, "The heck with it! I'll just write my own." I wrote the book. It was successful, and people kept saying to me, "Why don't you do one of these for the exhibit cards?" And I had the idea kicking around for probably 4 or 5 years, and then I happened to run into a time frame where I was able to put some time into it and go work on it. I had my normal business. I'm a lawyer by trade. I had a big case that was supposed to go to trial earlier this year. The case settled on the eve of the trial starting, and I all of a sudden had a month of free time. So I figured, okay, I'll just do the book.
Let's power this out.
Yeah, just knock it out, because I had all the exhibit boxing segment already written from the boxing card book, and I had a lot of the baseball card stuff already done because I had done the revisions on the checklists to the standard catalog about 15 years ago. So I had that information on hand. I had a significant amount of writing on the multi-sport stuff already done because I had done articles on those things. So it was kind of one of these things that wrote very quickly. The football cards was actually one of the tougher segments to write because there are some nuances there that I really wasn't 100% conversant with. I needed some help from that. I mean, Andy Becker helped me out on some of that too.
Mm-hmm.
That guy's name keeps coming up.
Well, good guy. He helped me out with the checklist on the 55s, on the postcard back ones.
Now, overall,
Stated.
again, jumping ahead. How many actual different football cards were actually printed? In other words, were there like a total set of all the variations of 100, 125?
Well, the base cards of each individual player, there's 59 different players.
Okay.
Okay, and so since they're printed on 32 card sheets, you can see, and they only did one sheet a year. We know that from the catalogs. So each issue each year was 32 cards. So they sub cards in and out in order to get that total. It was based on when guys were up, when guys were released, new guys coming up, that kind of thing.
So explain that to me again. There's only 59 players throughout 48 to 55. So
right.
7 years,
right.
and there's only 59 players. Okay.
Right.
Wow,
they
I
just
didn't know
reran
that
them and
either.
reran them and reran them. Sorry?
Same pictures, or did they vary the picture by year?
No, same pictures.
Just different backs, or blank backed or whatever. Yeah.
Well, they were blank backed except 55. What it was they started out with 32
55.
players. They dropped some of those players and put in some new players, kept some of the old ones. Then they dropped some of those players and put in some new ones, and so on and so on. That's why you have what people call the short prints, because there are obscure guys who really weren't around for very long, like Squirman Herman Wiedemeyer, right? Wasn't around for very long. It's a short print because he was only in there for a year or two.
Interesting. I actually didn't know that. I've collected exhibits for years, and I didn't know that either. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's why it's so miserable to collect the last 7 or 8 cards in the set, because they're from 1 year.
And who's the Hawaiian guy? The rare one, Wiedemeyer, or it starts with a W?
Herman Wiedemeyer.
Herman Wiedemeyer. He's the rarest of it, isn't he?
He's not the rarest. Anybody issued anybody issues a 1 year card is going to be equally rare. What it is with him is he's super popular because Hawaii 5-0.
Oh, got it. Yes, that's right.
He played Duke in the original Hawaii 5-0, so his card has just got this special, and he's Hawaiian, so it's got this special cachet to it, and people just go after it.
Yeah, that was the last card I needed to complete it, and I was looking for a couple of years for it.
Yeah, it's because it's so bloody expensive. When you find them, somebody wants $1,000 for it.
Yeah, it was $500-$600 for it, and just at SGC 60, something like that.
Now that said, the really tough cards are actually the tinted cards. And those are.
Why is that?
It looks like. Well, there's two kinds of. The basic cards are either black and white or sepia toned, and that's just how you're going to find them 99.9% of the time. Then you've got, for some reason, they also made a print run, or for a little while, with green ink on white stock, just like a boxing card would have been from the era. I don't know why they did it. They weren't paying attention. Maybe they just ran them wrong and put them out anyway. So the green tints are pretty tough to find. The ones that will really kill you are the ones that have color stock. Black. It's basically black print on color stock. There's green, pink, yellow, blue, red. Those are incredibly tough to find. It looks to me, just from what I know about the company's history, I think they found some old cardboard stock and just ran it. That's really what I think, because the last time they used colors like that were in the 20s. Or in the early 30s. So I have a funny feeling they just found some old stock and went, shoved it through the presses and ran the cards. So chasing after the color stock cards. I looked at the National every year for about 5 or 6 years for a color stock exhibit football card. I found 2 of them the entire time, and I didn't have enough money to buy them when I saw them, so I didn't pick them up. 2 years ago, I got lucky and found one in a commons pile at one of the shows. And picked it up at the National. Yellow, a Mastrangelo and a yellow stock. So I kind of scratched my itch for having one of those as a type card. I'm always looking for them, and every time I go to the show, I plow through as many exhibit card piles as I can to see if I can spot any of these short prints and pick them up. So if you get there on Thursday, Joe, they're going to be gone by the time you get there.
They'll be gone, yeah. And I realize that. I know my station. I know my station in this hobby, and it's definitely not. The guy who yells "Eureka" in the middle of a crowded floor. So
yeah, that's me. It's from the guy you always come around and say, "What are you picking through all that crap for?" Well, that's why.
I make fun of you.
Adam, is
like, what the hell are you doing, dude? How do you have the patience to do this?
Adam, is it realistic to say then there's 59 black and white, and then there'll be 59 sepia tone, and then an unknown with the tints, as far as variations
approximately.
are concerned?
Yeah, approximately. Okay. That's how it's distributed.
Interesting.
And that's not to say that some of the regular quote unquote cards are going to be easy to get. Some of them are really tough to find, and you're going to pay plenty for them.
Huh.
Those are the guys
Are
who
there
are
any other
year.
Like you mentioned the vending machine earlier, and probably like 5-6 years ago, I bought a 2-cent vending machine off a guy on a to be unnamed crappy sports card a chat room I just don't like saying that 54. Sorry, they suck. But so I had this 2-cent vending machine. It was really cool, and he had copies of some of the rare baseball cards that he put in there, and it actually worked. You'd put in 2 pennies and push it, and it'd come back out. And I love that. I had that on display for a long time. So do you have any other kind of periphery things that are involved with exhibits, or is it just strictly exhibit cards?
I've got the display. I've got one machine from the 1920s that I refurbished myself.
Oh wow!
Doesn't actually work because it came without some of the mechanism in it. But I just took the whole thing apart, cleaned it, refinished it, pounded all the dents out of it, and put it up as a display piece. Then I've got another one from the 50s, one of the 2-cent, one of the tall 2-cent Vendomatics that I haven't been able to get around to working on yet. It needs a ton of TLC. And then I've got the header cards, which are the displays that would go in the machine.
Yes.
And they varied all the way from the 20s where they made custom ones to later on where they simply slapped a couple of cards on a piece of black cardboard with a label on it. And so, those are the common ones. I've got some of those. My prize one there is a 1921 display header for Jack Dempsey from the boxing set.
Wow. Yeah, and I've got one of those too, the displays.
The one I would love to get is the Babe Ruth, but that's not going to happen. But
did they mix and match that? So, could you put it, or was it just this is a football vending machine, and that one over there is baseball vending? Did they mix and match them?
Great question. Actually, what I found in the catalogs is they would have recommended mixes, and they would customize a header for you if you decided to get if you wanted to do baseball players and boxers side by side, they would customize the header for you for putting into the machine. You tell them what size machine you had and how many cards it would display, and they would customize. A lot of them were smaller machines with a 2-and-2 display, 2 cards next, 4 cards across. Yeah. So they do baseball and boxing together as a 4-card across thing. Some of them were 9-card displays or 12-card displays, so they would customize them that way and send them out. The other thing I should mention that you can find occasionally for football are what are called the slicks. Somebody at the company, after about 20 or 30 years of this, finally realized, if we made paper cards for the displays instead of using full cardboard cards for the displays, it would cost us a lot less to mail them out to everybody. So they started printing up the display cards on slick paper, high-gloss paper, which would then be glued to the backings instead of regular cards. And that started in the 40s. The ones that I know for sure you can find are the football players from the 48 Champions set. You can find some of those as slicks. I've got a Bulldog Turner as my type card.
Yeah, I've got an uncut sheet printer's sample, blank backed, the sketches on the side of I think it's 12 cards that's slick, and I never understood what it was. I was always like, well, obviously it's a printer's sample.
It could be either a slick or more likely than a slick, because they did them as I had actually a full sheet slicks once for the non-sport side. They did them as full sheets. What you've got there is a proof piece. Yeah, well, it was mixed. It was baseball. It was baseball and football. I can't remember if there was another sport in there, but it was really confusing for the guy. For me, I had no idea how or when they were made, and I thought it was like I said, a printer sample, but I never even heard the word slick or heard it described. That makes sense. Yeah, it sounds like yours is a sample, and when you get into the sample stuff, now you're getting into some really just impossible to understand, really complicated, obscure stuff. I've been fortunate to accumulate like a half a dozen or so sample cards and printer-proof cards, and there isn't a single consistent thing among any of them. Wow. It's kind of funny. We've talked about this on the show before where, we know more about the nuances of some of these sets than the printers would.
And, take the 48 Leaf, for example. I'm pretty sure if the printer who ran that were ever to, we were able to go back in time and hey, how come it's white, this one's, black, between the knees and this one's white between the knees. Were you trying to tell us a secret message about the CIA? And he'd look at us and just go, what the hell are you talking about? No, I just, no, we ran out of ink, so I didn't put it in there that
right,
day.
Exactly. Well, I had the real awakening moment to that fact when I was at the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art doing the research for my boxing book. They have the Jefferson Burdick card collection there, but you can only get in there if you're using it for research. So I had to get authorization and go through security like the Pentagon to get into this place.
Oh, wow.
And when I went in and I said, okay, I'd like to look at the following things, the librarians looked at me and said, Mister, we don't know what you're talking about. Here's a book with a list of the volumes that Burdick has. Try and figure out what you want. Fortunately, I knew the ACC numbers by heart, so I was able to say, okay, this volume, this volume, this volume. But they had no idea what they were bringing me, no clue whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Reminds me of that William Shatner on Saturday Night Live where people raise their hand and ask him about, hey, in episode 3 when you did this, he's like, people, move out of your parents' basement and get a life.
Exactly. Well, that's what my wife says every time we go off to the National. Every year I say, I'm going to the National. You want to come along? She goes, no, you go play with the idiots.
Yeah, Nerd Fest. My wife calls it Nerd Fest.
Totally.
Yeah, but Bob, I don't know what the hell you're doing right, but when you get Brenda to come along, I'm impressed. So.
Well, we have a vested interest in the magazine, and she enjoys visiting everybody too. It's a book. But this year, unfortunately, she can't come out because she's just way backed up with her project. So and it's Cleveland too, so it's not that overly exciting. Although I made the big move this year. I will be staying downtown at the DoubleTree, so at least I can see human life as compared to the last time I was there, where I was at the Best Western, which I felt like I went back in time. I really wasn't back in time because there was nothing there. And it was nasty, but this year I'll be with humans, and I'll be downtown. The Hall of Fame is Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the casino. There's a lot of restaurants, so it'll be a heck of a lot better. Adam, do you have any collecting stories you want to share with our audience about the exhibits?
The only thing I can really think is a good story was. When I went to a show back, 25 years ago, when they were still doing free autograph guests, I always liked to get exhibit cards signed. And I brought Hall of Fame baseball player Luke Appling's card with me to have it signed. It's from his pictures from the 1920s. And he looked at the card, and he said, wow. He said, these uniforms, and he went on an absolute tirade about the crappy uniforms they made them wear back in the day when this was shot. They were the White Sox had black road uniforms, and he said these things would become sodden and saturated with sweat, especially if you're playing a doubleheader, and because they were so cheap, they wouldn't bring a second clothing change. You'd have to put the thing back on after the first game and go back out and play it's always fun with the guys when you can show them the old exhibit cards. They're really big pictures and they're really bold. So a lot of times these guys will look at them and go, wow, and they'll tell me something about the whole experience there. Hank Aaron was the same way. When I showed him mine, he's like, oh, yeah, that's from Milwaukee, looked it over. I mean, they get kind of a kick out of seeing them because they are so photographic.
Yeah. I wonder if you're a pro athlete and you keep having the same stuff put in front of you to sign, it'd be kind of cool one of these days to surprise someone like that, where it's like, hey, please sign this. And it'd be cool to have somebody say, like, I've never seen this card before in my life. What is this?
I actually had that experience. I was at the World Boxing Hall of Fame show, and I was actually at a table there to promote my book. There was a 4-time world champion fighter named Terry Norris, who's in the Hall of Fame. He's a local here in California. He was there with his daughter, who was basically running, little girl, probably about 10, 11 years old, running interference with him because he has pugilistic-related speech impediments, very hard to understand. So she was, guys were coming up with cards to have him sign, and she kept saying, I have that one, I have that one, I have that one. So I pulled out a very old card of his, rather obscure, and I said, do you have this one? And she said no, and I said, oh, well, here, now you have this one, and I just gave it to her, So Terry said something which I couldn't quite understand, and his daughter said he wants to know what your name is. So I told my name. He grabbed another card from me and wrote this long personal message on there, and signed the card for me.
Wow.
Wow, that's cool.
So,
Good
so
on you, Adam.
sometimes
I like
these
that.
guys appreciate seeing the odd stuff. Bob Feller actually made an extra mark on one of my cards because he was like, are you sure you want me to sign this? Are you sure you want me to sign this? And I said, yes, that's what I bought the ticket for. I want you to sign this card. He got so nervous, he actually started in the wrong place and then started again.
Oh, wow. What was the card? What was the card?
It was a 53 Bowman, which is a high number. It's a nice card. It's a high number. I guess he didn't get very many of those to sign, so he was kind of surprised I wanted it done.
Huh.
And the other football one I have, this was actually a good story. I was at a show here in Los Angeles they did about 30 years ago where the guests were Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, and Sandy Koufax. And how long ago this was, everybody who came got a free autograph. But it was random between the three of them. So I opened my random pack, and I saw that I had Muhammad Ali. Well, I'd already gotten his autograph in another show. So I traded someone for a Jim Brown. And I went in line, and I finally got up to have Jim Brown sign I used a 60 Topps card, and I had him sign that. And he says, this is an old one. Why are you getting this signed instead of a photo? And I said, I'm trying to get the greatest player in every sport to sign their card, and you are the greatest running back of all time. And he said, wow, yeah, thank you. That's really nice. And he, signed off for me.
Way to tug on that pride. I love it, Adam. Nice job.
Exactly. I actually ran into him in Cleveland a few years ago. Literally, I was coming out the door of my hotel room, and I ran into a wall, and it was Jim Brown.
Yeah.
How old is Jim Brown now? Think about that.
He's in his 80s. He was probably in his 70s when I bumped into him.
In his 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After I picked myself up, I said, hey, you're Jim Brown. And then I said, you probably know that already.
Yeah.
I said, what are you here for? He says, it was when they were inducting Hickerson into the Hall of Fame.
Oh, wow, Gene Hickerson, right on. But think about it, in 1958, if he was 20, that means he was born in 38. Geez, yeah, he's 80. Geez, he's 80. Jim Brown is 80, man.
Yeah.
Boy, I feel...
Yeah. Well, I saw him in L.A. about a year ago, driving down the street near my house, and he looks good.
Huh.
He's hard to miss because he drives a convertible Bentley,
Well, Adam, you've been doing this a long time, and obviously you've put the time in, with your books. So, I mean, what advice would you have for collectors who wanted to start collecting exhibit cards? I love this set. It's just so good looking. What?
Start out reading. Find out what's out there and what you really like. The Exhibit Supply Company probably made over 14,000 different cards during their time frame. So there's something out there for everybody. Even if you're interested in Olympic sports, for example, they've got like 3 sets where you could find cards. I mean, it's really comprehensive. You just have to decide what you like first. The other thing is start looking around eBay, and then if you can make it to a big show, make it to a show because they're going to be there, and you just have to dig for them.
Yeah, you definitely got to hunt for them. They're out there. I mean, you don't, especially going to a show. You'll never be. You can always be surprised what you find at a show, and something like that could be in a postcard box. And I've seen them at paper shows where postcard dealers have them in their boxes as a regular postcard. Not really. I
got one of the Jim Thorpe exhibit cards that way. They had it just out with a stack of entertainment cards for $5. Boy, did I buy that fast.
Yep. Is that the one of him in headdress?
Yep, him in the Indian headdress, correct. It's from an entertainment set. They had a whole bunch of cards from that set. They threw it out there along with them, and I looked at the stack. I said, how much are these? They said, $5 a piece. I said, great. Here you go.
I'll take this one.
I'll take this
funny.
one, an Indian guy.
Yeah, I bought my exhibit set. It was, 80% complete, and bought it, had quite a few of them graded, and I was just working on this set for all. But we've talked before about what the difference between somebody who buys a complete set and then basically puts it in a box and sets it aside, your Jim Crandalls of the world, and then the people who build sets and they know the nuances of it. And like I said, I bought the set partially complete, and then I struggled with the Wiedemeyer, and so I mean, I know a little bit about it, but I had no idea that all of them were cut from one set from 48 to 55, that they were varying years, and the checklist rotated like that. That's just fascinating.
That's what makes them so complex. Is you have these little things. There were some years in the 20s when they were making these cards where they actually pulled the cards in the middle of the run. So you might have multiple cards from that year that don't add up to the proper set counts. 1925, they have advertising materials that say they're putting out a set of 96. I've cataloged like 104, I think it is, from that year because they pulled cards in the middle of the run and substituted in other people.
It's like they lost count.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, very
unbelievable.
Cool. You going to the LTS dinner on Friday in Cleveland?
Oh sure.
Adam?
Oh sure. Wouldn't miss it.
Doing your stand-up routine?
Yeah, if I get something, and I'm also going to do the trivia game. So
we stopped doing the. Well, I ended up with the blue suitcase autographed Steve Largent thing.
Yeah, I think we had to retire at that point.
Yeah, that got set aside. I thought that was fun. That was cool.
I did too, but how can you top the home that it eventually found?
Adam, you have any? Adam, you have any other final comments or thoughts for the exhibits as far as our listening audience is concerned?
Yeah, my book is available at the publisher lulu.com, LULU.com.
Very nice.
And I highly recommend it. It's an incredible wealth of knowledge there. You did a phenomenal job in putting together something that was very sorely needed in the market, especially for the football
without a doubt
exhibit collectors, because I'll tell you, I learned a heck of a lot. I was always of the impression it was up to 1952, and then they just distributed what was left over, and I always thought it was just a black and white set, and the sepias were just basically printer scrap or whatever. But I really learned a lot, to say the least. So truly amazing.
No kidding. Ditto.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Ditto. Well, we'll see you on the floor, Adam. I'll be the guy in the Hawaiian shirt and the flip flops.
Making fun of me for sitting around and going through the dollar boxes. I know.
Adam Wasser, thank you very much for being on the show. We're almost out of time.
All right, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we'll see you in a few weeks. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Adam. See you, man.
Bye-bye.
Joe, 2-minute warning. 2-minute warning, and we got to wrap up before you're back in the USSR there. Long story short, what did we pick up in tonight's show?
Adam cracks me up. He's got a real witty sense of humor. His stand-up, he does a stand-up routine, as well. I've always enjoyed, him. He just cracks me up. I like making fun of him because he's that guy, an attorney, $500 an hour attorney, in L.A., who you'll find, sitting, sifting through the penny box, looking for cards, and I'm just constantly making fun of him. So I love it. But good writer, man. He dug in deep. He knows, like you said, learned a lot.
Yep. Well, like I said, I always thought it was just the black and white set. It was in 52. I've never overly pursued that set. Yes, I got cards for the set. It was just something that if I found it, I picked it up. I never really thought about, finishing the set, so on and so forth. But again, I'm finding more and more that if I go to paper shows, I go to like a postcard show, there seems to be more and more football stuff there to find and different types of things, including the exhibits, which can be bought very reasonably. Obviously, none of the true rare cards are available, but for general exhibit cards, they're out there. So it's pretty interesting to see. And again, Adam, putting everything together, now we have a better guide to go by, and it's much more understandable to the hobby, which is going to help us again when they find the color, the reds, the blues, the blacks, the ones he was describing, which I feel are just like some sort of printing waste that made it into the market, or for whatever reason they got cut up or whatever. it's fascinating to look at this stuff. But it's amazing. It's amazing to see what is actually out there and what's available. All right, we're down to 6 seconds. Again, we're sponsored by MSB Sports Cards. Check out their website at msbsportscards.com, and also by BSD Auctions. Please check out their website, bsdauctions.com. All right, so we're going to have a second show at the end of the month. Obviously, Joe will be in Russia enjoying the Cup, so we'll be having a special guest host and working on a couple guests for the future. Joe, I will hope that I know you'll have a great time. Try not to get into any trouble over there. And enjoy the games. Enjoy the games and all the festivities of another World Cup. And that's it.
The other football.
We'll be back in a few weeks. Joe, thanks for being on. Enjoy your trip. And thanks for listening.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.